welcome to another edition of the Vault Podcast. I'm Zan,
This is Brent.
and we're back to talk about music again. Let's just talk, we can talk about some stuff lately. Brent, what have you been listening to?
In all honesty, I'm halfway embarrassed to even mention this.
Don't
The past couple days, I have been like quasi-obsessed with electro swing.
That's awesome.
I had never in my life imagined that I would be listening to that, but I've got to be honest, it's something about it. It's happy, it's, bouncy, it's fun. It's just kind of the mood I've been in. I've been in a good mood the past couple weeks, and the music just seems to help with it, so...
That's what we're all about, expanding your horizons, not being stuck in the same of same old music, whatever style it is, just listen to anything. I'm still listening to the Hispanic channel, and I have no idea what's going on with it, but it's cool.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It started because I had shared a couple little swing tunes on the Facebook for the Vault, and, some good cherry poppin' daddies who I know everybody's probably sick of realizing that they exist, but, I still like a few songs of theirs, and, I'm one of those big people. I go to YouTube and just, search the related videos.
Yeah. That's one of the best way to find new bands.
So I started doing that, and I got into a couple electro swing things, and I was like, this is awful, and then I found one, and it's like, holy crap, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And so, I've always liked swing music, big band stuff, and all that. Like I said, it's happy, it's bouncy, the lyrics are always fun and full of innuendo, so it's always a good time.
Well, I've been listening to just all kinds of stuff, but I got a story to tell to start off with. Last episode we talked about the bluegrass metal, black metal band that we both enjoy. Couldn't think of the name. It's Panopticon.
Right.
It's a one-man band, and you should go check them out. It's one of the most unique things I think I've ever heard. But I got my CDs in the mail this week, and they shorted me one.
Uh-oh.
I was supposed to get 2 copies of Kentucky and one of Roads to the North. So I got a hold of them, and it turns out my email gets forwarded to the guy that's the one-man band of, it's him.
Nice.
He's shipping them from his house, apparently, which is totally awesome. That's awesome about buying independent music, especially online, is a lot of times it's coming from the people's house. And I asked him if it was him. He said yes. And we ended up going back and forth on a couple of emails talking about both of our past histories with the band King's X. He said,
nice.
He said that's one of his biggest influences, and of course, we'll get into that here over our topic today about how they're part of my life. So we'll roll right into that. Today we're going to talk about gateway bands and, what got us into music in the first place, as well as what bands started us on a road down a certain genre of music that then forked in the road to subgenres and then that subgenres. It just keeps going. So I'll let you start off with whatever you got.
As far as that actually got me into music in general, oh wow. I don't know that I can remember that long ago. And may sound weird, but I would actually have to say stuff like maybe even like Lee Greenwood and Johnny Cash.
Good choices.
Well, we took a lot of vacations when I was a kid, and when you're out there, especially we always went out west, and when you're driving through Kansas, at least at that time, you didn't get a radio signal for 600 miles, it seemed like. And so we were always popping in cassettes. And my parents were raised up in the 50s and 60s, and so they listened to a lot of that stuff. And so we always ended up playing. It was Johnny Horton.
Awesome.
Lee Greenwood and Johnny Cash were always the 3 mainstays. And I remember as a kid, the times I was awake when we were traveling, because if you've ever driven through Kansas, my God, the road to Colorado is straight through. It is.
It's time to sleep is what it is.
Oh, that's exactly what it is. But anyway, and so I remember that, and, we talked about the power music stuff last time, and so that kind of, it was just fun times and everything, and that kind of started me, paying attention to music and different things and all that. It ended up, I don't know, evolving or devolving, I guess, depending on how you look at it.
Probably both.
A little bit of both. But that's still one of my favorite genres. But honestly, that's what really probably got me into really seeking out music as something, enjoyable in, spare time and full time and everything. So, what do you got?
I got probably a pretty crazy backstory. I've pretty much been around music my whole life. My family's always been involved with music. My dad used to do lights and sound for King's X before I was born. My grandparents have always played, and my grandma still to this day. They've always played in country bands.
Awesome.
And actually made a decent amount of money, I guess, back in the day. My brother plays. My brother Zach Morning. He's the one that does most of our bumper music. So look him up online. I don't even know. He's got a Facebook page. That's all I know. But
Awesome guitar player. Just so everybody knows, really is.
Definitely. And we're going to keep, putting his songs on here for our bumper music. We got a lot of different ones to share, so let us know what you think. Kind of a weird turn of events. Joe Don from Rascal Flatts is one of my distant cousins.
Nice.
You can see there's a lot of musical influences in my background. And as far as what got me into it, I mean, obviously everybody I know is into music, so not so much anymore. I don't know, but when I was a kid, I remember I'd ride my mom to the mall. It was in the 80s, obviously. So she was listening to the pop music, like I distinctly remember Madonna, and maybe stuff like Kool and the Gang, like some of the more popular 80s stuff, new wave stuff. And of course, they played all that at the mall, which we've talked about in past episodes. All the music made us remember the 80s mall scenes. And I just remember sitting in my stroller and looking at these music videos and just kind of mesmerized. Like, I didn't know if I liked it or hated it, but it was just there. So I had that kind of stuff going on. You had the country music with my grandparents, and then my dad, I remember finding a box of VHS tapes, and he had Prince, AC/DC, and Wasp.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like looking at all these, we've talked about cover art in the past.
Yeah.
And the cover of these VHS tapes was just blown. I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? And that's, it's just, I was around it all the time, but I didn't really start appreciating it until later on. And I guess we'll basically start talking about our gateway bands at this point. When I was a kid, I'm probably about 10 years old or something like that, I started, I was basically listening to rap and hip hop. Very first tape I ever owned was Vanilla Ice, followed up by Criss Cross, Young MC, MC Hammer, and all the Shaquille O'Neal rap CDs.
Yes.
So that's kind of where it started. But then one day I was driving with my dad, and pops in 2 different CDs, and he's like, check these out. And one of them was Astro Creep 2000 by White Zombie, and the other one was the first Korn album. And that pretty much changed everything for me. I was like, okay, I got to go full bore into whatever this is. So, Dad, if you're listening, thanks. So, what kind of bands can you think of that got you started in certain genres, no matter what they are?
As far as the classical stuff for me, like I said, it was the Johnny Hortons, Johnny Cash, stuff like that. I still love that old stuff. One of my favorite albums of all time, Simon and Garfunkel, their greatest hits. It truly is to me. It's one of the greatest albums ever put together.
That's out of left field for sure.
Well, the whole thing, just the lyrics, every song is great. The musical composition is great. I'm not even a big Paul Simon fan, as far as his solo stuff. But for some reason, Simon and Garfunkel, I love that album. But one of them that I remember having a real big impact on me, and it was probably the first actual CD I ever owned, and I got completely screwed over and ripped off on it, and I bought it for my sister, and she took advantage of me and all that. And well, I think she ended up making $20 on the CD beyond what it actually cost, but at the time I didn't know what was going on with any of it. But I had just started playing the bass guitar, and I remember the song Come Out and Play. Whenever I heard that and I realized, I'm like, hey, I can play this on the bass, it completely changed everything. And I started listening more to the music and stuff like that. I mean, I haven't played the bass guitar in an embarrassing long amount of time. I couldn't even tell you how to play the thing anymore. But it got me past music as something kind of background noise, like we talked about before. into something that I was like actively listening to and enjoying. So I mean, The Offspring was one that really, really did that for me. The Smash album, it really kind of started everything, and then it was I don't remember how much longer it was, but I remember 7th grade. This tells you how old I am. I picked up the first Korn album, coincidentally enough, because I remember watching the video for Chutes and Ladders on that old music station that my TV could barely pick up. It was all kind of half scrambled, but it was the box. Yeah.
Yeah, the box.
And I remember like almost every night, it seemed like at 11 o'clock, they were always playing Chutes and Ladders, so I'd stay up and wait till I watched it. You know, Mom and Dad never would buy it for me. Oh, what's Korn? You know? And it's, you know, I think it even had the parental advisory on it. They're like, oh, we're not buying this. And
oh, yeah, that was the cool thing to get at the time.
yeah. And so we took a band trip to New Orleans. I was at the mall and ended up being able to pick the album up. And from there on, I mean, that was kind of the big gateway into, like, the heavier style of music. At the time, that was the heaviest thing I knew existed.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I'd heard, you know, stuff like Nirvana, some of the Alice in Chains stuff, little bit of Pantera, although Pantera really didn't stick with me until, like, probably 8th grade. And as soon as I heard, like, the song for Pantera that did it for me was Fucking Hostile, pardon my language, but that was the song for Pantera that actually stuck in my head beyond all of the other ones. I don't know why that song, because I wasn't really hostile. But yeah, I mean, that's just kind of where a lot of that started as far as, like, getting into, like, heavier music and everything.
Isn't it weird how you like you heard Pantera or some of these other bands, but yet they didn't stick with you? And then, like, for me, that first Korn album, you know, we're both got that in common. But yet, I remember seeing, like, Wasp and all that stuff that my dad had previously, and now I actually like Wasp better and some of those other older bands that are less heavy more than I do Korn. Isn't that weird how that works out?
Oh yeah, I'm the same way though. Like I said, I got the first Korn album, I loved it, I still do, but it was just weird. Even like Metallica and stuff. I mean, I recognized, you know, the musicianship was great.
Exact same thing with me, yeah.
But I'm like, okay, yeah, this is fantastic, but it's not the same thing for me. And of course, I think a lot of that started changing whenever I bought the first Seven Dust.
Yeah, go ahead with that. That'll segue right into what I'm going to talk about next.
Well, I was just going to say, it kind of, I don't know, for some reason there was a shift around the same time I got the Seven Dust album. And a lot of the stuff that hadn't stuck with me before finally started to a little bit. I have no idea why. I mean, that's a great album. You know, it's got Black and Too Close to Hate, Bitch on there and everything, and it's a great album. But I don't know why that marked a big shift. I don't know if it was just my age or whatever, or what, but
the shift with the older bands didn't hit me until later on, but we'll get to that in a minute. Kind of going back to what you said about the Offspring album being that first album. You know, like I said, the Korn and White Zombie thing came out, and I was like, okay, this is what I want to hear. But I had no job because I'm like, you know, 10, 11 years old. I don't have any money to, no, you know, my parents weren't going to buy me anything. My dad would make me some mixtapes, which definitely helped out. But I was just starving for this music, and I was listening to the radio nonstop. I didn't care what it was. I was trying to find all the rock stations. I didn't care about anything else. It was all about rock, no matter what kind. And I remember, like, the first Beck album was being played a lot, so I was like, I gotta have this. I don't remember which Nine Inch Nails album it was. It was really hot at the time, but that was playing a lot. And just all kinds of crazy stuff I'd hear on the radio, and then trying to watch videos from the box, MTV2 and MTV back when they actually played music videos and played different styles of music.
Yep.
So that was kind of the start, which then pushed into what was now known as the nu metal stuff. And this kind of a love-hate thing for me personally because, you know, I was searching. The internet was not huge at the time, so we were just kind of searching whatever the stores were carrying. Unfortunately, a lot of the record stores at the time, did not carry a lot of the older stuff, so we weren't, you know, I don't know if I'm speaking for you, but I didn't get a lot of exposure to the older bands, so because all they were carrying were the new bands that were coming out. So, you know, you had Slipknot, Mudvayne, like you said, Seven Dust, and then some of the Offspring or White Zombie or Korn, they would carry the new ones of them. But They weren't carrying a lot of the 80s stuff from what I could find. I spent a lot of time, money, and effort buying all of these CDs and from these new metal bands. I'm not gonna, you throw Limp Bizkit in there. Shoot, I don't know. There's so many other bands I can think of that I've got albums for, and then now I look back at some of those bands and I'm like, why the heck was I using this stuff? I can't stand it now. But that's if it wasn't for that period, I wouldn't have that get up and go search for music love. You know what I'm saying?
Right. See, I had a little bit different because I guess it was lucky for me. I had, an older brother and sister. That my brother was very much into Warrant, Bad English, stuff like that. So, I got to hear a lot of that stuff whenever I was with him. My sister listened to pretty much everything. She was really into the country at that time. A lot of, and I don't really care for a lot of it, but, it always kind of kept my ear for country open. So, I guess there's that. Like Trisha Yearwood, Joe Diffie is one that I always remember.
Oh, yeah.
He had a couple songs that I actually kind of enjoyed. I couldn't tell you what they are right now. But, stuff like that. But she also listened to the hair metal. That was whenever I first really started getting it, first heard, Rat. She was a huge Poison and Motley Crue fan, at least for, this area, kind of podunk area. But she also listened to some rap and stuff. So, I had actually a pretty good mix. But I don't know, at the same time, I was kind of like you. There's a guy I was working with at the time that was really into, White Zombie and Nine Inch Nails and stuff like that. So I started getting into a little bit of that too around that time, and it got me into the new metal. And honestly, whenever I heard Slipknot, the Wait and Bleed, that song is honestly like a major gateway into heavier music for me. That whole album actually, but really that song, I remember hearing it on an old, and I know you remember this, the radio station that was on at the time. And they always played the heavy metal music and everything late at night.
Yeah. Yeah.
And most of it scared the crap out of me, I'm not going to lie. They would get into, My Dying Bride, the black metal stuff, Dimmu, even some Cradle.
We'll get into getting into all that stuff here in a minute.
Right, but in all honesty, that stuff scared the crap out of me the first few times I heard it. I'm like, I don't know what this is, but I'm turning my radio off. But the Slipknot and the heavier stuff like that. And then it was the Mudvayne, the Disturbed, even some Head PE and stuff like that. But really, it was that Slipknot album, that first, the self-titled Slipknot, not the Mate Feet Kill Repeat, but the one with Wait and Bleed on it.
I think that first album set the tone for a lot of other rip-offs to come up behind it.
Yeah, it really did. But it was just, I was aware of, at the time, of your death metals and stuff like that, but I had never heard something quite as approachable to me at the time that had, just insane drumming, brutal vocals and all this and that. And at the time for me, it was just, I was just mesmerized. And, there for a few years, I was, I'd consider myself maggot number one. You know what I mean? It was just, if it was Slipknot, it was gold.
Right.
And I'm not, there anymore with them, but still, that was a very big deal, because from there, I ended up going to a lot of concerts of similar bands that I'd heard that come to town, like Soulfly. It got me into Sepultura, which I know it's kind of weird, because Sepultura is not really like Slipknot, but...
Well, they actually started adapting a little bit more of that style than they did in the 80s and early 90s, though.
Yeah, they did.
It's like we said, that first Slipknot album comes out and everybody wants to sound like them.
Yeah, and, I don't even remember, but it was somewhere around that time, not too far removed, was whenever the Roots album came out from Sepultura.
Mm-hmm.
And that, to me, I'm like, wow, they're Brazilian, it's weird. I still love Sepultura and everything. It's just, I don't know, that whole, like I said, it all just kind of fell in place after that one Slipknot album. I started getting into Fear Factory, which I started checking out their side projects and everything, and it just kind of went in from there.
Yeah, it just keeps going and going and going, and that's kind of my thing. I can't say I have a favorite band or I've ever latched on to a band. I like a ton of bands, but I can't, like how you felt for Slipknot, I can't say that I've ever felt that way about a band, because it's like an addiction we've talked about. I just keep going and going and going and going, and I can't stop because there's so many bands, and I want to just keep listening to them and listening to them. And that's kind of what I did all through high school. And I was buying a lot of the new metal, but occasionally I would find something that would slip through the cracks. And that's kind of where I'll start talking into some of my other genres that got me into. The first thing I could think of is Vile from Cannibal Corpse.
Oh man.
I found a used copy of that just kind of thrown in the rock band section. It didn't look anything like any of the other albums, so I was like, I'm gonna give this a shot. And I heard it, and I was like, wow, all this new metal stuff I've been listening to totally sucks compared to this. This is like nothing I've ever heard before. So that got me started on death metal. And also in between all buying that is when I started finding punk and hardcore. Dead Kennedys, Bad Brains, Ramones, of course, Minor Threat, Black Flag, Misfits, all that stuff started. It wasn't as heavy, but it had this attitude about the music. It had this kind of this FU attitude that I loved, I guess, being a teenager at the time, but I still love it.
Right.
And like I said, it wasn't as heavy, but it still had that heavy attitude, so I got me started into that. And then the last thing I can think kind of picking up out of this stuff would be black metal. And the first black metal song I ever heard was on that same radio station you're talking about. And I heard it was Cradle of Filth did a cover of Venom's Black Metal, which I didn't even know.
Oh wow.
I didn't even know it was a cover at the time. I just was like, what the heck is this stuff? Like, it scares me, but I was intrigued at the same time.
Yeah.
So I went out and got that, and actually I didn't go out and get it immediately because I was really turned off by the vocals. The shrieking, which we've talked. I did the review on Cradle to Enslave, which is the first album I ever bought from them, and it's kind of a make or break with those vocals. You either love them or you hate them, and I hated them at first. I couldn't stand them, but the more I heard them on that radio station, the more I was like, I'm gonna give this a shot, and then I ended up loving them. So that's expanded out a whole lot more from there, but I'll let you go ahead with whatever else you got, and I'll continue after that.
I never really got into, and I'm still not really that far into punk. I got into it a little bit there for a brief period. They had released the Black Flag tribute album or whatever it was for the West Memphis 3.
Yeah.
And there was a couple people on there that had done guest vocals on it and everything. So I'm like, all right, cool. It's got to be cool if they're doing it. So I checked it out, and I actually enjoyed it. I mean, it was good. I couldn't tell you much beyond, that I liked it and listened to it some and everything. I knew the Ramones and stuff like that. I'm still not a huge punk fan. I respect it, and I like a little bit of it. About as far as I ever really go with it is just a song that just thoroughly cracks me up, and it's Anarchy Burger by the Vandals.
Oh, the Vandals, yeah.
And like I said, that song just cracks me up, but as far as punk, I've never really been able to get into it real hardcore. Speaking of hardcore, Hatebreed.
Oh, yeah.
We were looking at going to an Ozfest, and all I remember is looking at reviews and everything, and every single review of the concerts from every single day kept saying, everybody's got to check out Hatebreed. They're stealing the show. They're making everybody look bad. So I'm like, well, who the heck's Hatebreed? I've never even heard of them. I bought, I don't even remember the name of it now. Oh, I feel awful now. It was Blue. I think it was Blue. The CD cover was Blue.
I'm drawing a blank, but I know which one you're talking about. That's my favorite one.
And,
it was their first major release.
Yeah. And I really wish I could remember the name of it. But anyway, so I bought it, and it took a little bit. I mean, I couldn't really get into it, but it kept calling me back, and eventually I ended up kind of enjoying a lot of the hardcore music. Since I've kind of cooled on it a little bit, but Hatebreed's still one of my favorites. But it took me a while to even get into not black metal, but death metal. Because I was intrigued by the cover art for Cannibal Corpse.
Intrigued is a nice word.
Right. And I had, at the time, a, I don't remember the name of the magazine, but it was one of the metal magazines, they used to put out all the time. And they did an interview with Cannibal Corpse on there, and they were talking about that whole thing with Bob Dole.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what the heck's going on? I checked him out. I'm like, holy crap, I don't even know what the hell's going on. I can't listen to this. And I just kind of shelved it. because I'm like, look at this cover. It's brutal. It's mean. It's gory. It's just not what I think I can listen to. Then I heard the is it Return of the Bloodthirsty?
The song or the album?
Yeah, the song.
I think it's just
Or Bloodthirsty.
Bloodthirst is the name of the
Bloodthirst.
album. I know the song you're talking about. I don't remember, but
Yeah, but I heard that song, or I heard that album, and there's a song on there, and I heard that, and I'm like, okay, well, this is actually pretty cool. It's not as mean as their other stuff, Of course, I didn't understand the lyrics at the time, and that started, but still, I kind of shelved it, and it was about that time that I really heard Cradle of Filth for the first time, and the song that got me with Cradle was From the Cradle to Enslaved.
Mm-hmm.
I remember hearing it, like I said, on that radio station that we were talking about a little bit ago, and the vocals, I couldn't get past Danny's just bizarre shriek, and it drove me nuts, but the music was just awesome. I loved it. Like I said, they played it, and I listened to it, and then it got where I was like, okay, well, maybe I ought to check this out. It finally started, seeping in. It was like, okay, I can't stand his vocals, it's not that great, but maybe I'll keep listening. Then I heard the song Her Ghost in the Fog, and it was gone. I ended up becoming a big Cradle fan and really started getting into black metal. At the time, I wasn't aware of, Dark Throne.
Same
the
here.
older...
All we knew, it's again, that has to do with the record stores. All we knew is what was current at the time. They didn't carry a lot of the old stuff.
Yeah. But like I said, it was the Cradle, and then I would go to whatever stores I could find that even knew what black metal was, which wasn't most of them. It was just you would get lucky in the rock and stuff that you would find one. And usually I found titles by you couldn't read them. I hate saying that, but it's like that meme on, there's a meme on Facebook I see all the time that's like a pile of sticks, and it's like, is this...
We're always talking about all album art. That's an easy way to spot a black metal band.
Well, seriously, I say that, and it's funny to kind of laugh at it, but it really kind of is.
Yeah.
The harder it is to make out what their actual name is, probably the better and the blacker the music's going to be.
Yep, definitely.
And that's how I literally had to find them.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, a while back, ended up on Demu, and at the time they started, I think they had Old Man's Child that came out.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then from there it ended up falling, and by the time I hit Immortal, it was just the full-blown enjoyment of that type of music.
And there's a lot of different styles within that style, so.
Right, and I just, like I said, Cradle's kind of changed some. I'm not as big a fan of Cradle as I used to be.
Yeah, me neither.
Some of Danny's stuff and everything's kind of bugged me. Yeah, like I said, it got me to Immortal, which got me into a whole new world, and... Immortal they're one of my favorite bands. They really are.
Yeah.
They're just fun.
They're one of the heaviest black metal bands.
Yeah, they're good.
As far as the powers of the riffs and everything.
Right. Yeah, it's
I'll go back, going back to right around the time I was getting out of high school. I had already, the bands you just named, as far as those first few black metal bands, I was already listening to them. I was listening to punk, hardcore, death metal, still listening to some rap. I pretty much had everything covered. But then towards the end of high school, I started finding myself intrigued by metal. So I remember seeing a video for Livewire by Motley Crue. And I found it at Walmart, of all places. And I was like, well, I know Motley Crue doesn't have parental advisory, so it should be. So I picked up Too Fast for Love, and that just kind of totally changed my mind on 80s hair bands. Because I found out that some of these bands, do you remember the Monster Ballad commercials?
Oh yeah, I used to have those albums, man.
I hated those things. I was like, who's gonna listen to these hair guys with spandex and sappy ballads? Which I still hate the ballads to this day. But
right.
Buying an album, and we've talked about this in past shows. Buying an album, that one crappy song can be overlooked by 10 other awesome songs. And the bands, you find out with Rat and Motley Crue, even Winger, Quiet Riot, a lot of these bands were a lot heavier than people gave credit for, and wrote a lot more rock songs than just the pop ballads or like Come On Feel the Noise or Round and Round or
Right.
Girls, 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 something like that. So I started really getting to the 80s hair bands, and then that somehow transformed into just 80s metal from, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Motorhead, and then into the weird kind of subgenres of that, like new wave British heavy metal like Saxon, thrash stuff like Slayer, Testament, and Overkill. But that kind of did the 80s for me, and then also about out of high school going into college, I started finding a lot of I don't know what was going on with me, but I found a lot of really weird stuff I was into. I loved the heaviness, but I started also liking vocals more and just kind of ambient music. And I started listening to a lot of like the Smiths and Bjork and Joy Division. A lot of, I guess you could say it was the origins of emo. It's, they were just basically complaining and depressed all the time. But it was just, I loved it. It was just something about it. I had never listened to that stuff. I was just used to listening to nonstop heaviness.
Right.
And then kind of to mix those two, I started listening to bands like Hopes Fall, From Autumn to Ashes, Under Oath, and I guess you could call them emo, screamo, whatever. Him, that's another band I like.
Yeah.
And I was finding, you can have the heavy music, but you can have really, really nice, clean vocals. You don't have to have the brutal screaming nonstop all the time. So I'll let you take over from there, and then I'll keep going.
I got into like the heavy music and everything there for a while. Like I said, my brother and sister, they always listen to some different stuff. So I always had that back there. I never minded the ballads, and mostly I think because of the song Fade to Black by Metallica. That was the first Metallica song I truly fell in love with. From there I started getting into Metallica, and that was around probably freshman year in high school whenever I'd first heard it.
Fade to Black is a lot different than like.
Well, it is, and it is, to be honest. That's fair enough.
I'll jam to that song every day before I listen to Every Rose Has Its Thorn.
Yeah, well, see, the problem with the ballads though is some of them are so cheesy. But at the time, I like girls.
Do you think that has something to do with our age?
Well, yeah, probably.
Like maybe that's mine, because like I didn't want to be. I wasn't trying to be macho meathead. I was trying to be like punk kid, I didn't want anything to do with these sappy songs. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, see, I didn't mind the sappy songs because, the girls liked sappy songs. And especially the girls I liked the sappy songs. So, that may not be the best advertisement for the sappy songs. But still, that was... I didn't mind them because they didn't.
It probably just depends on your mindset.
Yeah.
I'd be like, oh, you don't like Slayer? Hit the road.
Yeah, the problem is, though, I don't think there were any girls in high school who did like Slayer.
No. Maybe like 3.
Yeah.
But see, one of them you didn't know if it was a guy or a girl.
Okay, well, that just got off topic real bad. Anyway, but no, like I said, I'll just continue with the Fade to Black. That's what actually got me into Metallica, which went ahead and got me into the more like 80s metal, like the Testament, like you said, the Overkill, even
like the traditional metal stuff.
Yeah. And I never really got into Slayer a whole lot. I like them, and after seeing them live, I was completely blown away. Because, they've been playing for a really long time.
Mm-hmm.
And those guys are still just amazing. But, I would be hard-pressed to call myself a huge Slayer fan. But Metallica, that's probably cliche at this point, because everybody, knows and has a Metallica song they like. Even if, they've listened to nothing but bluegrass, they'll still know a Metallica song. But that's what really kind of got me into more like the 80s metal. Like I said, I was always a huge Rat fan. My sister had Rat and Roll and sat there and played that thing all the time. Like the greatest hits, whatever it was.
Of all the 80s bands, they have like the catchiest hooks and songs ever.
Oh, yeah, I still love Rat. You can't listen to it and not be better.
Yeah.
Honestly, I kind of have to blame you for some of this. I guess blame may not be the right word, but...
No, you can blame me.
Well, like I said, I went through a period there where, up through like the Slipknot Iowa album and stuff, I listened to, like on my own free time, whenever I wasn't with, a girlfriend or whatever, I listened to a lot of just heavy music, mainly Slipknot, Mudvayne, the new metal type stuff. And then there was one point, I don't remember exactly when it was, but I'd finally started getting into death metal real hard. Pathology was actually the band that got me into that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you know how long it's been since we went and saw them in concert. It really hasn't been that long.
Yeah.
And that's really been as early as I really got into death metal. You started listening to like doom and stoner like music and stuff like that. And you're like, hey, check this out. Hey, check that. I'm like, dude, I don't get it. I listen to it and my head starts floating. Then I found the sword.
The one thing I'll always say while you're listening to doom is if you listen to it for too long, you'll forget where you are.
Exactly. But then I found the sword. They're one of the bands. I ordered their album off an online site just because I was going for anything power metal. Dragon Force was big, and I even got into Rhapsody with some of their cheesy stuff. And I mean, it was anything power metal is awesome, And the sword comes up. This power metal is what it said on the genre for the website. So I'm like, sure. No. Not at all.
And that's a blessing in disguise.
Well, for real, it is actually. But it was their what is it? Is it Age of Winners or Age of Winter?
That's one of them, yeah.
Yeah, it was one of their first ones, I think. All I could think of at first, I'm like, this sounds like Black Sabbath.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan of Black Sabbath, but this sounds exactly like Black Sabbath. For some reason, though, it just kept like droning in the back of my head for the longest time. Eventually it started catching up, and it was kind of, I'm not going to say I'm a huge Doom fan, but I can actually understand. I mean, I know the sword's not really heavy Doom by any means, but it was just kind of
I'd say it's a little bit more acceptable and easier to listen to than some of it.
Well, yeah, it is. But it was kind of what got me into like the slower kind of music and stuff. And of course, I mean, they're a killer band. I love the sword. Like I said, I still can't. I like some of the Saint Vitus stuff. Spirit Caravan's awesome. Sleep's good. There's a few other ones that I like. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't get into any of that really until I started listening to the sword.
Yeah, and that's what it takes. I mean, that's it's those gateway bands that they might like. The Sword is a perfect example. It's got the kind of Sabbath sounding riffs, but it's not as droney. It's not as slow. It's got more of a classic rock feel to it.
Yep.
So it's easier for people to listen to, but then they can find out on YouTube or different sites that say, if you like this band, listen to these, whatever. And that's how I find almost all my bands, because there's sometimes where I'll find a band in a genre and I won't think, I don't think I'm going to like it at all. And
right.
Next thing I know, I love it, and then it just steamrolls from there.
Yep.
Well, I'll continue to kind of close out my kind of where I'm at now. I would say probably about the time I was getting out of college, I was listening to just about everything. Doom was starting to kind of creep in. The first Doom band I heard, obviously not Black Sabbath, obviously. I've been listening to them forever. But Pentagram. I heard a Pentagram song, and it was kind of like The Sword with You. It wasn't one of the slower ones. It was kind of more of the, I don't even remember what song it was, to be honest. But I was like, there's something different about this. Like, it's heavy, but it's basic.
Right.
Something like that, it just appealed to me. So that led to Saint Vitus, which, totally different kind of band, really.
Right.
And then to Cathedral and Candlemass.
Yes.
I can't. I'm drawing a blank just because there's so many. I'm trying to.
Right.
But Trouble. That's another one that was. They were more upbeat. They actually sounded more. I remember talking to somebody about Trouble. They're like, "Oh, what do they sound like?" And I'm like, "Oh, they sound like Black Sabbath with Axl Rose singing." Because that's what it sounded like to me.
Right.
It was just crazy. So that's kind of that. And then I never thought I'd say it, but I start, that around that time also. I guess it has to do with my age and getting to be older. But I started looking back at we talked about Silver Dollar City and bluegrass and how they played bluegrass all the time. So I was kind of wanting to feel like I was at the park all the time. I guess kind of being nostalgic. And I started wanting to hear bluegrass, and the only thing I could think of is Ricky Skaggs.
Oh yeah.
So I remember that guy used to play at Silver Dollar City like once a year or so. So that's kind of what got me going, not in the bluegrass. Most people think, oh, bluegrass, dueling banjos, which, okay, I mean, that's an okay song, but
Right.
there's so many different types of bluegrass out there.
Yep.
And then it got, like, even currently, like, Punch Brothers, which is, like, progressive bluegrass, which is really strange. There's just all kinds of awesome bluegrass bands. And then, which led me to what I finally, what I never thought I'd like, is older country music.
Oh yeah.
Basically anything from the 90s back, I love. All the Hank Williams, Cash, obviously. Really big John Anderson fan and George.
Oh yeah.
But then I started liking the 90s stuff for all the wrong reasons. Like you were saying, Joe Diffie, Alan Jackson, Garth Brooks. What's that guy? Aaron Tippin, Kiss This. I mean, come on, that stuff, like,
That's
just
amazing.
It kind of started playing to me like the 80s metal did. It was like,
Yeah.
it's so dumb, it's so cheesy, and it's so catchy that it's actually kind of fun to listen to.
Right.
And while I'm not going to go out and collect all the Joe Diffie and Aaron Tippin albums, it's still pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that kind of, I mean, and then, I'm always picking up new music. I don't know if there's any kind of music that I guess maybe classical. And I say that just because anytime I listen to classical, it makes me want to go to sleep. And I like pretty intense music, even if it's slow and ambient. I hope you know what I'm saying by that. It's kind of weird, but.
Well, yeah. See, but that's why I actually liked black metal. Was it has the classical kind of overtones with a lot of it. At least, that one time it had a lot. Like Cradle and stuff used a lot of stuff like that. And I've always been. I mean, I couldn't sit here and name you, this and that and B sharp or whatever. But I've always enjoyed like classical music and stuff like that, though.
I think that's one reason why you're talking about power metal. I got really into that, and I got really out of it pretty quick because I was like, oh, all right, dragons, swords, put me to sleep. It's like they all sound the same. But there was there's still, as far as power metal goes, I think Halloween is like Blind Guardian. Those two bands rule to this day. I mean, they're awesome.
Yeah, see, I don't know. I still like the power metal stuff, and I'm a big Viking metal fan. That started with Amon Amarth.
Yep.
I call me weird or whatever, but I love the Viking themed music. I know it's cheesy now. It's kind of, there's even a TV show now about all of it and all this and that. But I always have. I've always enjoyed Viking culture, which is part of why I really liked a lot of the Scandinavian black metal and stuff like that later on. I still listen to stuff like Insephirum. I didn't care for their newest album as much as some of their past, like Victory Songs and some of those. And they do a cover of Battery that was just awesome on one of those.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
But and even like Winter Sun is actually pretty cool. I enjoyed them.
Yep, they actually just came on my iPod a couple days ago.
Yeah. Of course, I guess the guy from Winter Sun used to be in Insephirum, actually.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I think he was like the first lead singer or something. I didn't know it either because I didn't get into him until like after him. But anyway, yeah, I still like the Viking metal stuff and power metal. I don't do the Dragon Force stuff as much anymore, except whenever I'm like running and exercising and I'm dragging behind. It's like Dragon Force comes on and like you can't do anything but move faster.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not, like I said, I was kind of like you a little bit. I fell in love with it and then I fell out of love with it for the most part, like the Dragon Force and stuff, because as soon as they came out and became popular and ended up on like Guitar Hero, it was like everybody wanted to sound like Dragon Force.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the, like, I didn't mean to turn this into a power metal show.
Oh no.
It's just a lot of the I guess songwriting and structures and sounds, like it's just you can say black metal's the same, you can say death metal's the same, but really power metal is pretty much all the same. Like all the bands, like you could if you want to talk black metal, you can definitely tell a difference between Cradle of Filth and Dark Throne.
Right.
If you want to talk death metal, you can tell a difference between I don't know, like 6 Feet Under and Incantation. There's definitely
Right.
there. But if you listen to Hammerfall or what's the band you named earlier? Rhapsody.
Oh.
It's like that's kind of the same thing.
Right.
But we'll close out the show with this, which goes back to kind of going in and out of the genres. You find yourself, some of these bands will stick with you. We talked about music and nostalgia and the power of music, but sometimes you just want to go back and listen to something you picked up in the past that you just want to listen to. And I can give you an example of that. I unexpectedly heard Flaw on my iPod. You remember them?
Flaw?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I forgot. I was like, oh man, I remember listening to these guys all the time. So, like, I'm not even that big of a fan, but it was really kind of cool to go back and listen to them again. Do you have any recent examples that you can say that with?
Honestly, the most recent example was probably the Cherry Poppin' Daddies. They have that what is the name of the song? It's like really long. It's the Ding Dong Daddy of the D trade line or something like that.
I don't know. I'll be honest. I have no idea.
And I love that song. I really do. Everybody else was, Zoot Suit Rioting, and it's like, no. Go a couple more after that song, and this one's really great. And everyone just kind of looked at me, but it's not on the radio. And it's like, well, that's a whole different topic. But, yeah, I mean, that kind of, I was just wanting to listen to that for some reason. And just another example real quick, also like the Cranberries. I don't know why, but the song Zombie's been in my head a lot lately.
Which is on our picks of the week, by the way, so don't forget to check those out.
Yeah. But like I said, I don't know why, because I was never really a big Cranberries fan. I liked that song and a couple others. There's a couple on that album that's actually pretty decent. But I don't know, for some reason that song's been sticking with me here lately. So.
Well, and that's, both of our examples is what you'll get when you expand your horizon and listen to multiple styles of music, regardless of what they are.
Yep.
And, if you're a true music fan, this stuff's going to come back. How many pop and country artists right now? I'm not saying anything bad against them individually, with the exception of maybe Jason Aldean and what's that guy you hate? I don't even know his name.
Blake Shelton.
Yeah, that guy. Those guys suck. I don't care. They suck. But most of them, you're not going to remember their songs even a year down the road.
Right.
And some of these bands we've listened to, while they may not be radio friendly, or they may not be popular, or they may also be 100 years old pieces of classical music.
Right.
They'll stick with you if you're a true fan. So we'll close the show out with that. Anything else you got to add?
I think I've said enough this time around, so.
All right, until next time, go listen to some new music.
Later.